In this video, I'm going to step you through unwrapping this simple model. It's a very basic house shape, but this should be a good way to kind of show you some different tools and some approaches to this. So the first thing you should do before you even think about unwrapping is you do need to make sure that you come up to, or wherever you have these tools, is we do want to delete our history and freeze our transform. Sometimes if you accidentally leave that stuff in your model, it can cause problems in your unwrapping. The other thing I would like to mention is that while you're unwrapping, you should make sure that you are saving often. Unwrapping is usually when I've personally had my crash on me. And if it crashes on you and you haven't saved recently, you could lose a lot of work. So kind of get into the habit of hitting Control S on your keyboard every once in a while so that you can save as you work your way through. All right, so let's talk about unwrapping this into a single UV texture. The first thing you should think about is what is that texture going to look like? Because that's going to kind of help determine how you want to unwrap this. So I'm going to think of this maybe as like a toy house. So, not a realistic house, it's just kind of a toy house. And I think that it's going to have maybe some kind of let's do like a brick siding. It's going to have a nice roof, and it's going to also have a brick chimney, and then a wood door with a painted door frame. So that tells me I should probably try to keep certain things together based on what kind of material it is, because I want to make my life easier when I take this into Substance Painter, where I'm not trying to hunt down all the pieces that should have brick and all the pieces that should have roof. It might also be easier then to purposefully split UV islands based on the material. So let's open up the UV editor, and I did purposefully delete out all of the UVs. It is possible to delete UVs and not delete polygons on your model, so let's bring some back. The way that we do that is I'm going to just select all of my faces, and then any of these UVs, I could do an automatic, I could do a cylindrical, planar, spherical. Any of these will bring back all of those UVs. This is a very simple shape, and it's not a very organic shape, so I most likely would probably choose an automatic unwrap to kind of get me started. And we get this. And I know a lot of people might be tempted to say, all right, it's unwrapped, we are good to go, we are done. No, this is just the start of our unwrapping, and if you were to turn this in, you would not get very much credit for your unwrap. So this is how we started, but we still have to actually manipulate this. One, there's a lot of wasted space. Two, our UVs are all over the place and they're shattered into individual pieces, which could possibly make it not a nice looking texture, because if we're doing brick and we want it to kind of easily go from one to the other, it might not look uniform, like especially with that chimney up there, and we have pieces upside down, so we still have to clean this up a little bit. The method that I recommend is I kind of like to, once I get it in this state, I do tend to grab them and kind of just push them to the side. This is the final resting area of my UVs. Sometimes some of the tools I use might put what I'm working on back directly in the middle. I don't really want to work on top of things, so I kind of have the habit of I move UVs to the side if I'm not actively working on them. So the first thing that we can kind of find is going to be are larger pieces. So I'm going to work on this roof first. And I know that I want the roof looking texture is going to be, on these, and these pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and I can, lots of different ways. I could come over to here. Since there's not a lot of polygons, I'm going to switch to the move tool, and I can just select them. Like I can go ahead and find them by selecting them over here. And again, before I do anything else, I do want to kind of look around to make sure that I didn't select anything I didn't mean to. And also I need to make sure I am only working by doing this with the select tool. Do not have your move tool on by accident or any of the other tools, because you could accidentally extrude your faces when you don't mean to. So please get into the habit of hitting Q on your keyboard and switching to the select tool before you do anything like this. So if I look back over at my UVs, I see it is all of these pieces. So some of them are free, like these aren't attached to anything, but these are attached. So what I need to do is I need to detach these from these UV shells. The easiest way to do that is to do a cut sew and do a create UV shell. I do recommend memorizing these shortcut keys, because you're going to be doing this move a lot, which is just Control-Shift-X. So either way, I can choose it from there, or I can hit Control-Shift-X on the keyboard. I'm going to hit W for my move key. I'm going to slide these on over into my workspace. So now I know that I just have those roof pieces, and I do want to kind of make these a little bit more uniform. So I'm going to, I don't want to just have a pile of them. It would be beneficial for me to kind of stitch these back together a little bit. That way, one, they won't get lost. Two, I can have a little bit more flow with them. So I'm going to go to my edge select. I'm going to select one of these edges. I'm then going to right click and hold on that and come down to cut sew and do a move and sew. Same thing over here. I need to stitch this back together, cut sew, move and sew, and then I might go ahead and just stitch this piece together too. Cut sew, sew, and this last one I do want to finish attaching, but I don't need to move and sew it. I could just sew that back together. And now I have that whole roof piece put together so that I could easily use this. I could easily unwrap it. I'm sorry, I can easily texture it. I know it's all kind of together. So I'm going to move this up here out of the way because it's done. I don't need it in my working space anymore. I'm going to move this over here. Next, I am going to fix my chimney. So I can go ahead and get my face. I'm going to use my select tool and find all of those lovely faces. I do want to make sure I didn't accidentally select anything else. I have everything that I need. I can then come over here and get my move tool and move this into my working area. I'm going to go through the same process. I do want to be a bit mindful though of where I put that final seam, since I might have a little bit of an issue with how it lines up, because I can't, recreate this in a 2D space. So where is that cut going to be? Probably somewhere in the back where it won't be quite as obvious in case there is a little bit of a noticeable seam. So I'm going to select this one so I know where it's at. That's right in the middle. I'm then going to just select this edge, cut sew, and sew that. Oh no, it popped it over. So who is the right one? Okay, that's still the correct front face. I'm then going to do this one. Do these all the way around. And then this is going to be the top. I'm probably going to want to do it right here so it is connected to that nice front piece to make it a nice transition. So cut, sew, move and sew. And the roof is done. I'm sorry, the chimney's done. So let me move this to the side. All right, next, let's tackle these side pieces. So we know it's that one. And when we start getting to more larger complex pieces, I can kind of do this UV shell, UV shell selection over here. So if you notice, if I have UV shell selection on in my UV toolkit, it still works back over here underneath, the regular one. So I can hover over it and click on it. I know it's over here. I'm gonna find this one, move it over, find this back one, and slide it over. And we know that's there. So this is going to require me a little bit of thinking, because remember, the three important things to think about when unwrapping. 1, we need to keep the textile density consistent through all the pieces in our unwrap. 2, we need to use as much UV space as possible. And 3, we do need to have some breathing room between our UV islands. So let's ignore this door for a second. We're worried about this door, and we'll pretend that these are just our pieces for now. So, you might think, well, let's keep it consistent. Let's go ahead and let's sew this all together so that we have a nice seamless it's nice and seamless. So that texture will just flow, right? But look, this large, it's not going to fit. Like, we can't get it to fit nicely. So we're going to have to then scale these, and I'm going to show you how to do this, what I'm doing right now, later, so don't get too caught up on it. We have to scale these now so that they fit in this space. So we scale it down. There we go. Okay, it fits and it has breathing room. But look at all of this wasted space. This is not acceptable. We cannot have this much wasted space. Texture space in game engines is extremely expensive. And you should treat this as if you are just, I like to use the example of if this was a big sheet of gold and you got to keep whatever was cut out of it, would you really throw this much gold away? Absolutely not. We would want to take up as much of the gold as possible for ourselves. So we can't stitch these ones together because they're too big. We can't take up that extra space by just scaling these larger, because then we have a textile density issue, a textile density mismatch issue. So in order to keep those 3 rules about unwrapping, we need to not connect these. And this isn't an issue because these generally are pretty large. They'll probably be easy to fix the texture in Substance. If there is like a little bit of a line, we can always try to make it easy for ourselves as far as how these are lined up, so that to make it easier in Substance Painter. So we actually can't do, like, these are done. Like, we can't unwrap these anymore. We can't attach them. It doesn't make sense to do that. So I'm going to move these to the side. These are done. These are done. So now all that we have left to do is the door, this door over here. All right, so the door itself is probably, like, this piece is probably finished. There's not much we can do about it. We just have to consider this door frame. It might be easy to think about, like, what if we just kind of stitch these all around and stitch these all around? That could work. It depends on the type of material it is. It's going to get a little bit funky kind of in the corners because we can't have any overlap. And if we do one of these, let me show you, we can't do this because we're having some overlap, but then we'd have to connect them. Then it's going to not be, a little bit stretched. It's not ideal. So another way to consider this is we can actually break this door frame apart. This would also be nice if we are trying to put like a wood grain on this. Like what if we wanted a nice wood grain material? Wood grain on door frames follows parallel with the longest piece. So the wood grain should be going up and then over and then down. And honestly, if you were trying to do that in Substance Painter, that's going to be kind of a huge pain. So let's make it easy on ourselves. I'm going to grab these two faces. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-X to detach them. I'm then going to rotate this just to keep things consistent. It's easier to see. So that we can just have these like this with our wood grain kind of going up and down, and they would look pretty nice. We can then go ahead and attach these edges on both sides to all these pieces. Cut so, move so. Oh, it went up there. That's okay. We'll just go through and do all these. And that is it for the door frame. We would want to, on our unwrap, make sure that these are together. The door can honestly be by itself. Like it doesn't necessarily have to stick with these because it might have like a decoration on it or something. And we are done with all of our UVs, at least preparing them to go into here. So next, let's prepare our UVs to go into the space. This one was very simple. We didn't have to do too much manipulation. And they probably stay pretty consistent, but I do always like to make sure that we do have a good textile density. So one thing we can do is if we, at this stage, it doesn't really matter what this is at. We can just select all of them and just set them to a textile density to make sure that they stay the same. Don't worry about the size. Obviously, don't make them way too teeny tiny or gigantic compared to this, but what we want to do is just make sure it's uniform. Next, we can use Maya to help pack it correctly into the space. We do this underneath here. Some other tools under this arrange and layout. Some other tools in here before we actually get to the layout that might be useful. If you're kind of tweaking some things and some of your UV islands get like, it's a little bit off, like that. I like to keep things a little bit straighter, especially when they're this non-organic, like they're very, hard-edged, very straight. If your stuff gets a little bit tilty, underneath the, not under unfold, underneath here, the arrange and layout, this orient shell is an easy way to get them correct at least to 90 degrees. And then if it's not the orientation you want, you can always use your rotate here to put it the way you want it. So orient, let's reorient those to be nice. Especially if we're going to put wood grain on those or in the door, keeping them nice and straight will make sure that we don't have to do anything weird in Substance to do that. So once we know the textile density is consistent, and if you wanted to orient our shells, we can do that. And then we can lay them out. So I'm going to select all of them. I'm not going to click the layout button. I'm going to hold Shift and click the layout button. This will give us a dialog box that allow us to change some settings. The big one is that we want to make sure that we have, let's see, give me a second to look at this. Our shell pre-scaling, we want to preserve the 3D ratios. We also want to decide if we want to allow this to rotate our shells. I don't necessarily mind. For this though, I probably want to keep them nice and even. So while I'll say yes, we can rotate the shells, I want the rotation steps to stay 90 degrees because I don't want them to be at weird angles just to kind of fit them a little bit nicer. If we were doing something a little bit more organic or it didn't quite matter as much, I would possibly drop this down to a 1 degree so it will try rotating them all, a lot to see if they would fit the best. Next, we want to make sure that we have some shell padding and tile padding. This will allow us to have a little bit of breathing room, and this is a number that we can play with. Like this process doesn't take too long, that we can see if this 8 and 8 works. If we hit apply. Oh no, hold on. Sorry about that if there's a little bit of a jump there. I forgot a setting. I didn't see it down here. That was the problem. I had it set to be specific for something else. So one last thing to check. Scroll down all the way, even though it looks like that it might be done there. It can sometimes scroll down a little bit or make this a little bit larger. We need to make sure that the scale mode is not set to off or anything weird. We need to set it to uniform. Then if we hit apply, it will do it correctly. We can see if we liked that padding, if that works pretty well. And this is a pretty good start for me. I didn't like though how it rotated these upside down. That's kind of weird, and these are sideways and not quite how I want them. So what I could try to do then is, what if I turn off rotation? Let's turn rotate shells off. What if I want to keep these rotated specifically like that? I can hit apply. And you know what? That looks pretty good. I might, as a starting point, this looks closer to what I'd probably want to begin with. I still wouldn't necessarily consider this done, but it did get me a really good starting point to then try to fit this a little bit better and maybe keep things a little bit closer. Like this is the roof and these are the walls. I probably want to keep those walls together. So I'm going to do a little bit of rearranging. So I would prefer these to be together. And in fact, if I kind of see that, this is kind of pretty close to where, these are pretty close. I was concerned about putting them together and having them fit. You know what? I think I can afford to move these together. You see that? I think those will work together fine. This roof now, I'm going to rotate it sideways. Will it fit here? I could probably get that to fit. I can slide this over here. This will fit in this corner. I then know that this roof piece, this is the chimney, it can fit there. It's not quite in. Let's bump it down a little. Move it over. Then we have the door. I might just put that door there. And these are the door frames, and I'll just put those here. This is probably good enough. I could probably spend a little bit more time trying to get it to fit better, but take up a little bit more space. But there's a little bit of like, am I spending too much time worrying about this? This I would consider having taken up enough space. And again, don't get tempted to come in here and be like, wow, there's so much empty space there. Let me just scale that up, because then we're breaking that first rule of the textile density needs to stay consistent. So we're going to do that. So yeah, we have it unwrapped. This would then be good to go to export out into Substance Painter. So let me show you that last little bit. Let's put this checkerboard on, and there we go. Looks good. Hopefully you had fun working through this and you have a little bit better understanding of how to approach unwrapping.